Alrighty. I'll do an intro later. But so so Noah, I have Noah Winter with me once more. Noah, how you doing?
Good. I feel lucky to be back a third time.
And your last time.
I expected as much. That's okay.
Uh,
I knew the luck would only last so long.
Dude, I was like frozen big time on that. Oh wait, the audio people can't hear us, but so I'm just gonna
Just
start talking
just
now.
start over.
Yeah, let me just start over. Hey
Okay, let's start
guys.
over.
No, hey, guess what? Guess what I did yesterday?
What?
No, I want you to guess at least 50 times. I want to stretch out the podcast as much as I can. No, I started Lawrence of Arabia.
Emphasis on started because I'm pretty sure it's impossible to finish it in one sitting.
Dude, oh my gosh, like I really tried. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I watched 2 hours of it, and it's a 4 hour film, so I had 2 hours left, and I was like, I can't. I got too much stuff to do. it
No,
was.
I mean it's just go ahead,
I
please,
was gonna
please.
say
Cause
I was
this yeah.
really enjoying it. It's just a very dense, very what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost kind of like 2001: A Space Odyssey. Like
That's a really good comparison, I'd say. Yeah.
it does those wide shots, and you're just like,
Hmm.
okay, they're gonna cut now. Okay, they're gonna cut
Would
now, and then 5 minutes pass, they're still in the same shot. You're like,
yeah.
okay, they're not cutting never.
Would it would you say that it almost felt to you like you were watching a scripted documentary?
Very much so. Yes.
Like
Yes.
somehow they literally made it so realistic that it almost got to the point where you really feel like you're living through this with them, and you're also living through all the kind of slow parts in between the cool parts. I mean, you are there for every step they take across the room.
Dude, yes, you really are. Like, I'm so glad I started it because yesterday here in Huntsville, Alabama, we got some tornado warnings. So I was like, well, if I'm gonna die, I need to at least watch a great classic film. And it was either Lawrence of Arabia or Gone with the Wind. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I know Gone with the Wind is like considered like one of like the greatest films of all time and won a bunch of
Yeah.
Oscars. But there's something inside of me that just does not want to like watch it. I own it. I'm looking right at it. I think it moved when I just said that, but I have like no desire to watch that film at all. But I'm going to eventually. But I was like, Lawrence of Arabia time. I'm gonna
Yeah.
watch the whole thing in one sitting. And then 2 hours passed, and I was like, nope, I'm gonna take a nap instead.
I mean, I feel like they really wanted you to feel probably what those actual people felt like in real life, walking across the desert with no idea what they were doing there.
Such a beautiful film, and
It's
I don't even want to imagine how hot it was filming it.
I absolutely it is. That's the thing. Like, it's so huge and so beautiful that like you don't feel like you're watching a film. You feel like you're just kind of living through someone's life, which means, even if you're like looking at a site like that in real life, eventually, you know, you look at something else, like, or like you kind of look at something different. Look at that film. It's just like they want you to experience everything
Yes,
for the full time that they can make you experience it for.
you're absolutely right. Like, man, I wish I had time to watch it tonight, but I promise you, I'll finish it the next time we do one of these things. It's almost like Kubrick loves to do that, like with the stuff. Like I said, 2001. Like he also kind of does that a lot in Barry Lyndon, where he really lets you soak up the environment and like you really do feel like you're there in that time period.
Mhm.
At least for the certain runtime. It's not like you have to be checked into a mental hospital because afterwards you're like, all right,
Yeah.
I'm in I'm in the 1800s now, or whatever Florence of Arabia. But I really enjoy it. I love it. Also, spoiler alert: if you haven't seen this film that was shot, came out in the early '60s, I love the way they opened it with the death of T.E. Lawrence. By the way, that's not really a spoiler. Like T.E. Lawrence, like people should know he's dead by now. But I love, I love how they open with
Thank
that
you.
and
Thank you
how
for clarifying.
so like I was just blown away that that's how he died. I was just like, wait, he just died in some like random motorcycle accident that like
Yeah.
any other like if you put Tom Cruise in that incident, like he's surviving that, like in any other
Mhm.
movie. So I just love how like they're just like, yeah, he died in this way, and this is how the story begins. I thought that was a really unique way to approach the film. But moving past Lawrence of Arabia, I know you had some questions, or is there anything that you watched this week that you want to share about before you get into those questions?
Well, actually, the questions related into something that I had watched, and funny enough, the thing I had watched also relates to sort of this like larger than life figure like Lawrence of Arabia.
Mhm.
Um, and it's a person who's living right now, and it kind of larger than life just in terms of what they do.
Oh, is it me?
Uh,
You watched my movie?
so it is you, and that's why obviously I want to ask you. But no, to be fair, there's the person I want to mention, and then it ties into questions kind of about your story and things you've told me about your sort of journey. So I guess this will be a little bit of story time exchange.
Well, I
um,
love talking about myself, listeners, so this is going to be amazing.
so I guess I'll do kind of. So I came across that what do you call it, the masterclass programs
Yes.
where you can kind of like watch different masterclass episodes or series from different influential individuals.
Yeah, it's so cool because at first they started out with like just like acting, filmmaking. Now they do like how to
Oh my
play
gosh,
tennis,
it's
how to like ice
insane.
skate, how to cook. It's so cool.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I love kind of always learning about film and learning about filmmaking and learning about acting, but I never am really one that will seek out a sort of put together program like that right off the bat. I don't know, I'm kind of more sort of someone likes to sort of learn experientially, I guess.
No,
But
totally.
but when I started seeing there were so many different varieties, I don't know about you, but like I love gathering knowledge or perspectives on the film industry through the lens of like other people's stories that don't even relate to the film industry, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like everything's sort of interconnected, especially when it comes to storytelling and movie making. And so the guy whose masterclass I came across, he's this incredible National Geographic photographer named Jimmy Chin, and he's
Okay.
also one of the two directors responsible for that movie Free Solo that won the Oscar. I guess it was last year or
Was
year before last.
is
The
that the
one about the guy that
one?
climbed the mountain
Yes.
without any ropes. And so I have the mountain. I mean, the movie about the guy climbing the mountain. Totally
But you
fascinating.
own the whole mountain now?
The
Wow.
mountain fascinated me too. That's why. and the sound, I'm like listening to this guy's story, and it was amazing because though he sort of is in the film industry now because of that film, he wasn't before. He was kind of just like an adventure photographer. And when he was telling his story on the masterclass, I was like, this is so fascinating because it reminded me of kind of like stuff I've experienced. It reminded me of stuff you've experienced and just stories I've heard about from people in the film industry about taking like very unorthodox paths to wind up in the film industry. Um, and basically for him, he basically said that, after he graduated college, his parents, expected the usual. They were like a lawyer, doctor, or, scientist. Like those are your choices. And
And
he
he was
was
like,
like, well,
no,
I'm
I
gonna
want to climb stuff. He
and so
starts
literally
climbing a tree.
and literally he told his parents like, well, I'm gonna go climb and just kind of get it out of my system for a year.
Oh,
I'm
I'm
gonna go
dead.
climb, I'm gonna go ski, I'm just gonna go like live out of my car and just get it out of my system, and then I'll go join the real world. And so basically his parents were like, absolutely not. And he's like, well, too bad, I have to get it out of my system before I go and do whatever you guys want me to do, so I'm going. So he goes out to Yosemite and he climbs and skis and whatever for a year, works all these random jobs just to sort of get him by from one climbing excursion to the next. Literally, he's living out of his car. And he goes,
Wow.
1 year turned into two turned into three. And eventually goes, I was living out of my car and climbing in Yosemite for 7 years.
What?
And
What?
now he is like a world famous photographer. But he said he got into photography totally by accident. And he said the way it happened is a friend of his was trying to be a professional photographer and lent him his camera just for like a weekend and showed him how to use it just for fun. Like just say like, dude, look at my camera here, go try this out. And
Yeah.
so Jimmy takes the camera, takes one photo, gives it to his friend. He's like, thanks, man. That was a fun weekend. See ya. His friend goes and tries to sell all these pictures he's taking, and someone only buys one picture from this guy, and it was the picture that Jimmy took.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh. So
and
they're
so
no
Jimmy
longer friends. He's like,
yeah, and so Jimmy got $500 for the picture, and Jimmy was like, and he said in the master class, he's like, this wasn't about art, this wasn't about like the love of photography. He literally said, if I can take a picture every month and sell it, I can climb for the rest of my life.
I
And so,
love that.
but it's fascinating because a purely, kind of coincidental alignment led to a lifelong passion. And now he lives and breathes, photography and this sort of mountain terrain filmmaking and stuff like that. But the really cool thing I found was he eventually went to go meet this, guy that he admired, this photographer that he really admired. And he literally tracked him down and like literally met him in person. And all the guy said was, here's a picture of a couple mountains in Pakistan. If you're really into this, here's your objectives. Go climb those and take some pictures. It like didn't really give Jimmy anything other than that. And so Jimmy went, no, it's okay. And so Jimmy went and literally scraped together the funds for this climb in Pakistan by himself. There was no press following him. There was no news about it. He was literally just kind of doing this in obscurity. And so he went and climbed these mountains, took some pictures. The pictures got in a couple of outdoor magazines. And then a couple of weeks later, this mentor that he had tracked down like a couple of years ago called him up and said, hey, I saw those pictures you took. I can't believe you actually went. We're about to go on this expedition and one of our guys just had to drop off. Do you know anything about filmmaking? Can you come along with us? And Jimmy was like, I know cameras, but I know nothing about filmmaking. He's like, it's fine, man. Just come on.
And I would have totally lied in that situation and be like, filmmaking? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. And so Jimmy goes on this expedition. And so Jimmy goes on expedition. And this was really kind of the start of his whole kind of career in that high level adventure photography, mountaineering community. The whole reason I brought it up is because he said the most important takeaway from that story, though, because he says it's so easy for people to focus on where I am now, what I'm doing now, the stuff I get to do, the people I get to hang out with, the places I get to go. But he's like, everyone keeps missing the most important part of the story, which is he's like, if I would have been given that opportunity by my mentor to go climb with him and these guys, I would have never been able to do it had I not spent 7 years doing my due diligence in Yosemite with no one watching me, no one taking my picture, no one interviewing me, just me literally working odds and ends jobs and climbing mountains in Yosemite. And he literally said, because of that, one thing sort of waterfalls into another. And all of a sudden, it's like that quote where they say, luck is preparation converging with opportunity. And I just found that such a beautiful sort of metaphor for a lot of people's journey in the film industry, where it's like, you might be doing these sort of like odds and ends and strange jobs and sort of working in obscurity, but there's this kind of underlying love that drives you through it all. And you build up this sort of years of due diligence and just sheer experience around people with storytelling and movie making and sets and production. And eventually, these certain opportunities come through and you can take them and succeed at them because you had those years of just consistency behind you. And the reason I brought it up to you is because I remember when you were telling me your story, you brought up all this stuff about like your time working at the grocery store and your time just kind of working in Alabama and these guys that kind of supported you along the way and were always asking you how your career was. And then, these certain opportunities come along and you have those days and months and years of just steady consistency. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, like I can do this. Like I'm ready. And then you do it. And because of all that time, you were able to do that, not because you were always jumping to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. You know what I mean?
Dude, absolutely. I feel like everything that you just said kind of like summarizes. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
I've heard of it.
You should go read it. Go read it right away. It's so inspiring and it's really cool. He kind of breaks down why certain people are successful in their lives. And one of the things he like does the Beatles and then Bill Gates and some like other people that I wasn't even aware of. But what they all had in common was that they put at least 10,000 hours into their craft. And so that's what made them just a huge hit or so well known in their whatever job they were doing at the time. But like one of the cool things I didn't know about the Beatles was that they would play, I think, like all night long, like in these like
Wow.
dirty, unpopular clubs, and they would just
Mhm.
play all night long, their own stuff, covers all
Yeah.
night long. They would do that like throughout the entire week. And then just because they wanted it so badly, they weren't just like,
Yeah.
all right, let's go play like an hour at, this bar. They were like, we just want to play anywhere because that gives us practice in front of people. And like
Definitely.
that book was really inspiring to read because it was just like, listen, like what you want, no one knows. Meaning
Yeah.
like, if I was like, man, I'm this really great actor, how come I'm not getting work? It's like, well, no one knows that unless like you put in the work.
Yeah.
No one's just gonna call you up. Like Steven Spielberg isn't just gonna call me up one day and just be like, hey, Sampley, like, let's make a movie. It's like, no, I have to like, make connections
Mm.
and like be in other
And
stuff. So he
and you
can
and
see
you
me.
well, you bring up a fascinating point because what you just said also ties into kind of the current trend of, these sort of people that get thrust into the spotlight out of nowhere. And it's so easy to get, just totally zoned in on these people who get these roles out of nowhere or get these crazy opportunities out of nowhere. And they get all this kind of attention and all this craziness and all this stuff. But it's like, do you want a burst of fame or do you want longevity in a career? And that's what I've always found a fascination with is this. There's so much obsession with the sort of the moment of just being put in the spotlight like that and being given that opportunity. But so many people, I feel like, are given those moments and they don't have the preparation to back it up. And sure, they might get the fame, they might get, the attention and all the sort of focus on them for however long. But I would be hard pressed to find many people who were thrust into the spotlight like that and ended up having a very steady, consistent career.
Yeah, like I feel like there's two different like categories you can put that into like how come these people are just getting work? Like one, or what's the saying? Overnight success. I feel like there's two
Yeah,
versions of overnight success. One of them is, wait, why is this guy getting work all of a sudden? I've never heard of him. Well, that's because he's done 100 student films or short films or whatever that people just haven't seen.
totally.
Now he gets his shot. Or you have someone like Jacob who never acted before and got a chance to go audition for Mud, and he booked it.
Mhm.
And you could look at that, and he could have been in the position to be like, well, okay, that was cool. Now I'm going to do other stuff or whatever. Or, all right, I'm going to try to be. And he even said in that podcast, like he didn't work for a year, but he wasn't just sitting there waiting. He was trying to figure things out. He got like
Definitely.
a manager, and he asked like all the people around him like what he should do, like kind of what you were saying. You see, sometimes I even watch movies and I'm like, man, this guy gave, or this guy or woman gave a really great performance. How come they haven't worked on anything else? And it's because they just didn't have the work ethic because they thought, oh, I've done this one thing. Now everyone's going to come swarming at me. When in reality,
Definitely.
that's so rare for that to happen. So like what you're
Definitely.
saying, yeah, I would much prefer longevity than a burst of fame. I
Totally.
love they said that.
Well, and like you said, it's like the two versions of overnight success. You have the overnight success that is unintentional and just comes out of nowhere for someone. And then you have the offshoots where you have someone like Jacob who takes that and is like, okay, now I'm gonna go build up the foundation to supplement this blessing that I've just been given.
Yeah.
And then you have other people who are like, oh man, I'm just gonna ride this wave. And then all of a sudden you realize that it's the most important parts of your career are not the moments when you get the thing, it's the moments when you're building up to it and the process that you go through to get to whatever that thing is. Because there's always going to be a new thing. Like there's always going to be the next thing. There's always going to be the next role, the next big film, the next big something. But the one consistent thing is how are you going to conduct yourself in between those things and during them? And, back to like the Jimmy Chin example, he was given this great opportunity by his mentor to go climbing with these superstar, rock climbers and photographers. Jimmy didn't know anything about filmmaking, but he had the foundation and all the other areas that he could handle himself on that expedition and then learn everything else he needed to learn on site. And that's the thing. One thing wasn't lacking the other. He had what he needed foundationally, and then everything else the other guys could kind of teach him as mentors. And it's kind of this meeting of two sort of forces at play.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And one of my favorite actors is Ryan Gosling, and he could have easily been. Oh yeah, he was like on Disney Channel, or not Disney Channel, but or I guess the old version of Disney Channel. Because he was part of the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse.
Yeah.
And so like he could easily be like one of those like kids who just like, oh, they disappeared or they went and did something else because maybe they didn't want to do it, or maybe because they didn't know how to do it. But
Yeah.
what's really cool is he had a very, very small role in Remember the Titans, where he plays the cornerback. And he only really has a couple lines in that movie. But what I found really, I watched this interview on Instagram that like popped up in my recommended, and it was Ethan, I think you say his last name, Suppley. He's the bigger guy, and he was on My Name Is Earl, and he's been in some other movies. But one of the interviewer was like, so who was like the hardest worker on set?
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, without a doubt, Ryan Gosling. And the guy was like, Ryan Gosling, really? He's barely in that movie. And he's like, but the thing about him is he took it so seriously, and he knew that not only was it like a role, but it could be a step to something else. But at the same time, he was always in the moment, and he was always working on his lines, and he was always trying to improve the character, because easily he could have just come in there and been like, oh, well, this is an easy role, I only have a couple lines. But like every single day he was working. And then that's why, he's been nominated several times and has worked with so many great directors, because like he really puts the work in.
Yeah.
And of course, rest is also an important part of work, but you really kind of have to put in, like I said before, like Malcolm Gladwell said, put in your 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
And like obviously, the what is the mountain climber's name?
Jimmy Chin.
Jimmy Chin, thank you. Jimmy Chin did that without even realizing it, but that's so cool that he goes back and looks at it. It's like, wow, like I put 7 years, otherwise I wouldn't have gotten. So that's really cool.
But everything you're saying, he said too, or he's like, I didn't step into photography, is what he was saying, as an art form. I stepped into it out of necessity because I wanted something else. And this is also very similar to people that go into the film industry. They go in for one thing and they do something else out of necessity, and all of a sudden the necessity becomes the passion. And they're like, oh my gosh, I love what I'm doing now. And one of the things he said, because he's like, I put in those hours. I put in those 10,000 hours with my camera. I was filming, I was shooting, I was taking images, I was climbing every day. But he's like, the trick is, if you're really involved and you're really passionate, like your Ryan Gosling example, you're putting in these hours, but it doesn't really feel like a burden. It feels like something that you just kind of do. You just kind of have to do it, or you just want to do it. Like, I feel like you and I are probably passively taking in knowledge about the film industry every day for hours and hours at a time through any means. And that could be whether, I feel like you and I operate very similarly. We're like, we'll just be driving around town or walking through the store, and you'll just see a picture, or you'll see a person, or you'll see, some sort of source of information, and your mind will instantly start connecting it to knowledge and thought processes about the film industry, which only just trains your mind even more. And so it's like those 10,000 hours, they can be physical, but they can also be like intangible stuff. It's just that consistent living in that headspace of constant refinement. Like, you're never just green to go and perfect. You're always fine tuning, refining, connecting, fusing, searching. Like, it's always on.
That's one of the things, and you and I have talked about this privately, is we both enjoy writing. And that's one of the things I really love about writing, is that writing isn't just sitting down and like actually doing like typing or writing with play, but writing is also in the car or at the grocery store, like constantly. Yeah. So that's really cool that you said that, because I don't think I've ever vocalized that before, but that's so true. I love that, man.
Well, you said the thing about the rest part. You mentioned rest being a part of the 10,000 hours. Mm-hmm. And rest doesn't have to be sleeping. Rest can just be time away from the actual physical act that is involved in, whatever your thing is. Rest is just the idea of giving your, subconscious time to just work with it and think about it and just fuse it together and all this stuff. Like the Jimmy Chin example, I'm sure that spending all that time alone in Yosemite you have a lot of time to just think about stuff and a lot of time to refine things and fine tune things. And then, when the sort of convergence of an opportunity comes, you can take it, even if it feels daunting, you can take it. But then all those years that you spent, refining in your own time is right there with you to back you up as you take that step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And wait, is all of this in the documentary?
This is all in the masterclass.
Oh, in the masterclass. Thank you. Sorry. So I gotta go check that out. That's awesome, man.
But I guess I just loved his perspective because he was all about like being present during the process. Because, he said that in his profession, more than anything, when you reach your goals, they're usually some of the craziest experiences you can ever have. Because in his line of profession, a goal is not a promotion or, a bump up in a position on a set. A goal in his profession is skiing off of Mount Everest. A goal in his profession is like, climbing up the sheer face of a cliff without a rope. It's like stuff like that. And he said he always noticed that once the initial adrenaline of those moments weared off, he found that they were really fleeting moments and he really would not feel satisfied. And he would have to go distract himself with the next big thing. And he said it was only later in his career that he realized the true best times of his career and professional life was when he allowed himself to be totally present during the process and the buildup to the goal, if that makes sense, rather than always projecting forward to the goal itself. It's like living in those 10,000 hours.
Dude, absolutely. And like, I just kind of realized like this is, even though like we're doing this for fun, like I love doing this podcast, it's also like kind of like a way to like gain another hour or so, because
absolutely
and we're not doing that just so we can say we did it, but just because like I love talking about this stuff, especially with you. I love talking about movies, I love talking about TV, and like this is like honestly a form of rest for me, just because like
but you're so right. I mean, it is part of those 10,000 hours because we're both getting to refine and gain new perspectives, and it all works in to, he kept saying the words due diligence. He said, those 7 years were my due diligence. The time that I take now between expeditions, that is my due diligence. He said, the due diligence never ends. You just build off of consecutive levels of due diligence, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And if you're listening and you haven't read that book, and no, you should go check it out because you would absolutely
really need to.
It's really not even that long. It's maybe only like 200 pages, but all of Malcolm Gladwell's stuff is really good. And he actually does a podcast, I believe, that's pretty good. He's a very insightful person. But do you have any other questions about this subject that you wanted to like direct towards me? Because I know you said you had something.
Yeah, I guess my thing was like, sort of in the way that, with Jimmy Chin, he kind of discussed these actual examples of his time of like due diligence. Because I feel like I told you about mine during our first podcast together. But I feel like on this one, I mean, I'd be curious to hear you dive a little bit deeper into like, how do you perceive your sort of years of due diligence before, this sort of current era of your professional progress sort of kind of started to pick up, with these sort of roles with HBO show and then 12 Mighty Orphans or whatever it may be. Like, how would you sort of perceive that similar part, like your version of Jimmy Chin's 7 years of Yosemite?
I think simply I'm just better than everyone else. No. No.
A little bit of confidence doesn't hurt either.
No, that's arrogance. But no, honestly, I think there's, I also teach acting, and I see a lot of students come in and they instantly want to do Shakespeare. I want to play Hamlet. I want to do the scene from a Tarantino film, or I want to play this villain from a Scorsese movie, or or all these other like big stuff. And it's just like, whoa, hold on, like, sorry, but no, you got to start with like a one-liner and then just like build yourself up, because that's not how the greats did it. Like, you may even be extremely talented, but there's no way you're without any acting experience before you're going to go up and do Hamlet successfully. And so at first, honestly, like that's how I started. I was like, man, I want to do this Leonardo DiCaprio scene in my acting class. Totally. And I did it, and I was just like, man, that was just like not good. And it's because I was just copying Leonardo DiCaprio. So like I kind of had to step outside and be like, okay, I need to start from square one and like take steps. So really, and what I like to tell my acting class is like, I guess it is possible, but if you want to make acting in movies and film like super easy, if you want to make one-liners super easy, or even like my role in 12 Mighty Orphans, like I'm not a lead character, but I'm there most of the time. I get some lines, but like I don't have any soliloquies I'm giving out or anything. But it could still be a very challenging role because Chicken's a very different character. He stands differently, he talks differently, he moves differently, and that's not something that you can just go into without any preparation. And so, you start doing, and this is how I did it. You start doing the easy stuff first and mastering the easy stuff. Then you do the kind of a next thing and you master that. And then you get a point. Eventually, you then get a point to a point where you're like, all right, let me get my hands on some Eugene O'Neill or Tennessee Williams, and really understanding, not only performing and acting well, but really understanding it from, understanding the themes of the play, and really understanding what the screenwriter wrote the play for and what he's trying to tell the audience. Because if you can't do those really, really, really difficult things, then you're probably going to struggle with the easy stuff. And once you can really master that really hard stuff, like doing all this other stuff is just really easy.
Totally.
I've been acting. So the first thing I ever did was extra work. I'll try to keep this brief. I did extra work on a film called Space Warriors, and that shot in the summer of 2012. And it's 2021. So I've been acting for 9 years, because after that, I don't really count that experience as acting, but I started taking acting classes after that, because being an extra is not acting. It's just not.
But it's still that exposure to the world that builds up your familiarity.
Exactly. So, but because after I did that, I was like, okay, I want to do this. I want to be on set all the time, but I want to have lines. I want to have, I want to have a real role, because being an extra, honestly, some people may get offended to this, but like being an extra, you're honestly just kind of a prop. And Hitchcock said that, and I think a lot of people get it's like, well, they're people, blah blah. It's just like, yeah, I know, but they just need to be blurs in the background. That's all I was. But so I wanted to start taking acting classes, and acting class is really all just about learning how to fail. Really, just like anything in life, learning how to fail, meaning, okay, I failed. How do I then, not do that next time? I'm still definitely in my journey of, because I'm not a full-time actor yet, and COVID especially did not help. And I know a lot of actors that it did the same thing to them. But it's really just putting in work every single day, like you said, like just absorbing as much information as you can on any given day. But I think it's really easy for me to do that just because I love it so much. Like, I honestly believe that God put me on this earth to do this. And it's like, honestly, kind of a scary thing as well, because sometimes, if I'm being just transparent, sometimes I get really frightened because I have nothing to fall back on, because I don't like anything else.
Yeah.
Like sometimes, they ask actors like, oh, what would you do if you like weren't an actor? And they're like, oh, I would, go be a librarian, or I'd want to be an engineer.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, it's kind of like all or nothing, honestly.
Yeah. Well,
but besides doing this, I guess, but this is because honestly, you can make a living doing podcasts, but this doesn't really feel like a job. Neither does acting, really. I just want to do a job where nothing feels like work, honestly, because everything else feels. I know there's a very long-winded answer, but I really love to hear myself talk. If you haven't noticed, Noah.
That's why we do podcasts.
Exactly.
What better place? One of the things you said in there when you're kind of with the transparency, and not to make my entire section of this podcast about Jimmy Chin, but I was just really impacted by this masterclass.
It's like, dude, get over him. Move on.
In the very first episode, he said something very similar to you, where he said, nothing in sort of the, quote unquote real world worked for me. I just did not fit with it. It just wasn't me. And he said, everybody wanted that of me, but he said, I just genuinely could not perceive myself in those shoes of people that were telling me to do that stuff. Absolutely. And that's why I say he just kind of like broke off and just went and just lived on his own in Yosemite basically. And he said that there's a lot of times where there's this kind of ebbing and flowing of like, one day you really feel that strength of the direction you're in, and then the next day you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Exactly.
And it's just like on and off. And the thing he just said is that consistency every day, even on the smallest level of literally just going outside for him and just clicking the button on his camera, going outside and just putting putting a rope up on the mountain, like just the most simple actions. He just said it's those tiny little steps that even if there's one day where, nothing really happens and nothing really goes on a larger sort of more, like, I guess you could say like spiritual or the religious or universal level, those little tiny actions are all adding up, even if you can't see where they're adding up to just yet.
Can I just say how hilarious it is that like we're talking about all this deep stuff, and it initially started because some boy was like, I like to climb stuff.
It really is.
Isn't that amazing?
No, I mean, and
like, what?
Well, that's why I laughed so hard when he said, I didn't like the thing he is known around the world for. He's like, I'll have everyone know front and center. I did not join photography because I thought it was a beautiful expression of art or because it was some meaningful, soulful experience. He's like, I started taking pictures because I needed money to climb walls. And like, that's literally what he said was the start of his like career. And now like the only thing people ask him about is photography, and it is like his lifeblood. But he started it as literally just like, I need money to climb, so I'm just going to take some pictures.
He should do a master class on climbing. Like, just imagine how awkward that just like they don't go outside or anything. They do it in like the same sound stage. So he's just like, this is how you climb a chair. This is how you climb the stairs.
Yeah. But what's so cool is he said, even though my sort of whole thing is sort of taken this unforeseen detour into photography, he's like, some people might be like, so then why'd you spend all those years climbing if you just became a photographer? And he's like, but you guys don't understand. My job requires me to be an incredible climber first and a great photographer second. Yes. And so he said, and that goes for a lot of people in the film industry. I don't care what industry you're in. You could start on one path that you really believe in, and it could take a detour into something that you feel you just have to do out of necessity. And then all of a sudden, the two of them will kind of loop back around and join into something that fuses both of them. So it's like, he's a photographer by trade, but he had to start climbing in order to be safe on his expeditions that allow him to get his pictures. And it's like, with you, like, I'll let you translate it in your own terms, but it's like all these different little, routes you take somehow seem to kind of re-merge together to like propel you along.
So audience, what Noah is trying to say, if you're listening right now, I want you to stop what you're doing. If you're in the car, pull over. If you're inside, I want you to go outside, and I want you to, so the first thing you see, I want you to start climbing it. Okay? Just start climbing it. I don't care if it's legal or illegal. Start climbing it. Like if it's a water tower, like
don't think about it.
Gilbert Grape, like start climbing it like little Arnie does. Just start climbing. I'm gonna do that right now, actually.
It really did. It made me want to go like climb anything in sight because I'm so inspired by this man. I need to go climb something.
Dude, wait, does he as you can see, I have the poster Disney's Tarzan behind me. Can he climb like Tarzan? Can he like surf like trees with his bare feet?
I wouldn't put it past him.
Dude, I always like wanted to do that as like a child. And now whenever I watch that movie, I just like cringe at like whenever he's doing that, because just imagine his feet just just burning. I know off topic. I know we've already been running for I think about 30 minutes now, because these are short segments with Noah Winter. But is there anything else you want to talk about? Are you good to end the podcast there, friendo? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. It's a very beautiful.
No kidding. I feel like we've been talking for like hours in a good way, not in like a long drawn out way. All right. Sometimes when we're on the phone, I'm just kidding.
Dude, no, yeah, we'll talk for like 3 hours. In reality, I just kind of put my phone down and then I walk, like I'll leave the apartment. I'll come back and be like, man, he's still talking. Wow.
I do the same. Dude, I do the same thing to you. I literally mail my phone to a different house, and then
I'm just still talking about Lawrence of Arabia. I'm like, man,
I'll start the call at the store, put it in the mailbox addressed to me, and then I'll drive to my house. It'll show up a couple days later, and you're still talking.
I'm still talking. Oh, I'm dead, man. Hey, well, let's end it right there. And then please tell me I was recording.
Oh my god.
I am. Oh my god.
Okay.
I got really scared because you know how we did. Dude, I legit almost had a heart attack because you know how the first one crashed.
Yeah, the first one crashed. That was terrifying.
I was like, I don't remember hitting record on the second one, but I did. So I'm gonna stop recording now. Hey guys, Sampley Baranaga here, and I'm going to tell you why I use Anchor for my podcast, and it's simple, because it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer or tablet, whatever the heck you're using. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and you can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Do it, or else we're going to have a problem. And I don't want to have a problem with you.